Good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar on adult bullying when a bad apple spoils the workplace. My name is Honor Feedy and I'm with the Professional Services Department at NAESP, and I'd like to welcome you to this exciting session. With us today, I am very pleased to announce Kathleen Scarapa, one of our outstanding mentors, is with us to talk about this important issue. I think you'll find her very interesting and a great speaker. Kathleen has 26 years of experience as an elementary and middle school principal and has received numerous awards for her work. She's, as I said before, she's an outstanding mentor with us and currently coordinates the statewide mentor program for the state of New Hampshire. Kathleen, I am very pleased to see that you're going to give us a lot of good information on adult bullying for our members here today. Kathleen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Honor, and welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. I wanted to start by giving a little bit of background about myself. Thanks for mentioning the 26 years. And in those 26 years, I worked in urban settings, I worked in suburban settings, and I worked in kind of semi-rural settings. So I had the opportunity to be with young people and children from all walks of life. I did that for 26 years, and for the past 4 years I've been working with the mentor program and teaching at a university. And I hail from the beautiful state of New Hampshire, and I have to say that the foliage this year was really, really great, but the hurricane blew down all the leaves just as they were at perfection. So we were a little disappointed with that, to say nothing of the floods and all the other damage that was done during the hurricane. However, in New Hampshire, we did not get it as badly as some of the other states. So I'm grateful for that. Today's session is about adult bullying. We're not going to be addressing student bullying at all during the presentation. And we have for our goal today to stop adult bullying in the schools. So I've designed the essential questions that we'll be addressing during the seminar today, and we'll be talking about bullies, adult bullies. Who are they? What do they do? And why do they do that? Who are the victims? What is the impact of bullying at work? What about the law? And what actions can be taken to stop bullying in the workplace? So I'd like to start with a definition of bullying, and this definition has been coined by the Workplace Bullying Institute, also known as the WBI. Workplace bullying is the repeated mistreatment of one employee targeted by one or more employees with a malicious mix of humiliation, intimidation, and sabotage of performance. One of the features of bullying is that a target is subject to exclusion. And actually, the recent research on exclusion shows once again what history has told us, and that is that ostracism or social rejection are very, very powerful. And that's one of the reasons from early time banishment was considered such a serious punishment, because people have so much trouble dealing with being ostracized. So we're going to jump right into your experiences as listeners. I'd like to know, what kind of background do you have with workplace bullying? And your choices are: I have never been bullied or witnessed bullying at work. I was bullied, but in a previous job, perhaps when you were younger. I have witnessed others being bullied at work. Or I am either being bullied or witnessing bully at work now.
It looks, for those of you that have voted, here's what the results are. 40% of the participants it was actually an even tie between C and D. 40% said that they are currently being bullied or have witnessed bullying at work now, and 40% say they have witnessed others being bullied at work. 20% said I was bullied in a previous job. So quite a few are being bullied now or have witnessed it.
So I take it that no one has never witnessed bullying or experienced it in our poll.
Correct. That is correct.
Oh, that's very interesting results. I'd like to compare that now with some nationwide results. And this is from a survey that was done by the Workplace Bullying Institute, and it's from 4,210 survey respondents. So if you look at it, there's about 50% of people who don't have any experience at all with workplace bullying, and we've got about 26% that have been bullied, but you need to combine that with the 9% that are being bullied currently. So that's a total of 34%, with another 15% who have witnessed it. Now, of course, our statistics are much higher, but that makes sense because the people that are listening probably are joining us because they have a concern about workplace bullying. But I did want you to see what the national results are and how widespread workplace bullying actually is. So let's think for a minute about, given that all of the population that is experienced with bullying, what percentage of the bullying would you think is peer-to-peer? In other words, in a school setting, teachers bullying other teachers, what's the percentage that you would imagine that would be? The answer is 18% of workplace bullying is peer-to-peer. And thinking of a famous person, this is a young actress, Emma Watson, and she's been made very popular because of her appearances in the Harry Potter films. And even a young person like this has experienced peer-to-peer bullying because when she was in attendance at Brown University, she actually had to leave because her peers at Brown had so many comments to make whenever she was answering questions or just trying to be a student at Brown. And she really just left for a while, and I hope that she'll be able to return to Brown. And here's another kind of very famous person who experienced bullying, and the bullying that he experienced was when he was in the fields in Iraq, and his fellow soldiers referred to him as the ginger bullet magnet and made it clear to him that they felt that he would be one of the first that would be shot because of his appearance. And I think that's very interesting to think that even famous people can experience bullying. So here we are. We're back to bullying that occurs with the subordinate towards their boss. In other words, most of you out there are bosses. And what percentage do you think it's actually subordinates bullying their bosses? So the answer to that is 10%. 10% of workplace bullying is subordinate to boss. An example of that, in a sense, is Dr. Robert Atkins, and this isn't strictly subordinate to boss, but it was very interesting that Dr. Atkins had a controversial diet, and what happened when he was at the peak of promoting the kind of dieting that he thought would be good, which later proved to be very effective, he experienced a heart attack, and he was really ridiculed for having the heart attack because people were making the connection between his diet, which he was on, and his heart attack, even though his heart attack was actually caused by a chronic infection and not part of the diet. So what do you think about the percentage of bullying that's done by the boss? And here we have the highest percentage by far, and that's 72% of bullying is done by bosses. And here's a classic example of someone who was a boss, the director of many movies, and Alfred Hitchcock is well known for the bullying that he did, especially towards the female actresses in his films. And one example is with Tippi Hedren. And one of the things that he did to her is when she was acting in The Birds, he failed to inform her and told everybody else not to inform her either that the birds that she would be dealing with in the big scene when the birds go wild were not mechanical birds. They were actually real birds, and they actually really did attack her. And that scene was shot so many times that her doctor had to intervene and forced Hitchcock to suspend production of the film for a week while Hendren had the opportunity to recover. But getting back to schools, most of you are principals or definitely bosses, and so one of the questions I have for you to ponder is, would you consider yourself to be someone who engages in bullying behavior? In other words, are you a bully at work? And I can pretty much guarantee that most of us will say, oh, no, I don't do that. But the research says that many people who engage in bullying who are bosses are not really aware that that's what they're doing and the impact that they're having. So the question is, does your staff or any member of your staff view you as a bully? How about your students? So I'm dismayed to say that most of the bullying that's done at the research done at schools happens to be targeting the principal and how principals can have bullying behavior. So just something to be thinking about. One thing that we have to proceed with caution about is if a principal is engaging in bullying behavior or talks down to teachers or so forth, then this really undermines what everybody's trying to do in terms of eliminating bullying among the students. So, on to the bystander effect. This is one of the really troubling aspects of bullying, and some of you had 40% there who are witnessing bullying, and you may be able to identify with some of this, that some of the problems that bystanders have is that they're not really able to name the phenomenon. They're uncomfortable and they know they don't like something, but they don't really have words for it. But they do feel helpless to do anything about it. And they tend to be afraid of the bully. People who are bystanders do experience vicarious traumatization. So, in other words, it's nearly as upsetting for people who witness bullying at work as it is for the person who is being bullied. So let's get back to individuals in school settings and think for a moment about your superintendent. Does he or she engage in bullying behavior? Is that individual being bullied? For example, in New Hampshire we have a lot of small towns and school boards and superintendents that are kind of out there with their boards in these little isolated situations, and they really are subjected to being bullied by their school boards. I think bullying among school board members towards superintendents is fairly common. And I know that as an onlooker to that, I've had all those feelings of being very, very uncomfortable, being a little bit afraid, not knowing how to step in, and really feeling helpless. There wasn't anything I could really do but sit there and watch that happening. So let's talk a little bit about the past and the present. How about teachers who are bullies? Well, anyone I've ever talked to who had parochial education really remembers being hit with rulers or being terrified of the nuns or being belittled or definitely experiencing bullying from their teachers. Even today, on the fields, this is a concern about coaches that are bullies and the reaction of students to the bullying and the reactions of the adults watching this go on. So we have this phenomenon about, oh, look out, such and so teacher is in such a bad mood. And I really want to pose the question, is it appropriate for a teacher just to be in a bad mood and act on that in any way? And is that teacher developing a pattern? And this is from a clip from a teacher. This is a real situation where a teacher was really talking in a very inappropriate manner to students. And this is one of the quotes pulled out. There ain't going to be a stinking thing you can do. And he's talked to them however he wants to. And you have to be very concerned if these are the kinds of things that are going on behind closed doors in classrooms. And even there's something a little more subtle that's going on as the stakes have risen and teachers are under a lot of pressure to perform. And you can bet the teachers are putting students under a lot of pressure to do their best. And how often are they going over into the category of bullying? How about teachers who make comments like this to kids? They've got the smiling face there, but what's coming out of their mouths? And what is the message that they are giving to students? And isn't this actually bullying by somebody who is a boss? So let's say these things are going on, and let's say they're even recorded. They're caught on tape. So now what? Well, we have probably one of the most famous incidences of bullying that was caught on tape. Probably many of you are aware of the Klein situation that happened last year, the New York bus monitor who was actually being bullied by students. And in that case, it was fairly easy for administration to identify the voices of the students, and the students were properly disciplined. But if this hadn't gone viral, what exactly would have happened then, if anything? So when all of these things are happening, you can imagine that there's quite an impact on a school culture. To what degree has workplace bullying impacted your school culture? Not at all. It's somewhat impacted the school culture, fairly strongly impacted the school culture, or dominates the school culture?
Let me tell you what the responses are. Oh, it's fascinating. We had 71% voted, and 50% said that there was somewhat impacted school culture, number B, and 50% said C, fairly strong impact to school culture. Nobody wrote in not at all or dominates.
Okay. Well, that's very good information. We're going to take a look at some other polling that's been done. And this is a WBI survey. And here's what they found out about the phenomenon of workplace bullying. 62% of bullies are men, and 58% of the targets are women. 68% of bullying is done female to female or male to male. And actually, it's not surprising, the statistics that you gave about 50%, 50% somewhat or fairly strongly, because workplace bullying is four times more prevalent than illegal harassment, and that's mostly meaning sexual harassment. So in other words, people are being more bullied than they are sexually harassed. And 80% of the time, it's women targeting women. If the woman is a bully, she's most likely to go after another woman. And the conclusion of the Workplace Bullying Institute is that the workplace is becoming more toxic for women. So I mentioned before that it's difficult to find the words for bullying, and these are some of the words that have been found in the literature or tossed about. We've got workplace terror, harassment, mobbing, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, workplace mistreatment, emotional abuse, workplace aggression, incivility, hostile work environment or behavior, workplace trauma. But the one phrase that the people who study this phenomenon are really working towards is healthy workplace. And when you hear that phrase, healthy workplace, what they're really talking about is bullying in the workplace and eradicating bullying in the workplace. So the International Labor Organization has studied this phenomenon for a long time, and they have concluded that workplace bullying is the fastest growing problem in the workplace internationally. Now, many people have made the connection between the spousal abuse as it occurred, say, 30 years ago, and they're saying that it really parallels today's workplace bullying in this sense, that first of all, there aren't really good words for it. And 30 years ago, you didn't really have terminology to describe what was going on at home. And in fact, for the most part, people being abused at home, spousal abuse, was basically a secret. And even for kids, they were told, listen, what happens at home stays at home. Don't talk to anybody about what daddy's been doing, that type of thing. And as with the bully, it was always the abuser's motive to control and dominate their spouse. And this happens in the workplace today. Even the victim presumes that in some way it's deserved, as though somehow it's their fault. And that's what women who were being abused, and of course this still goes on to a lesser degree today, but it's always, oh, if you wouldn't say those kinds of things, you wouldn't set him off. Oh, you know what he's like, so why do you do that? As though if you do that, well, of course you're going to be hurt. And people in the schools, they have that same kind of attitude. And the abuser and the bully, they're both dehumanizing their victims. Of course, this causes a lot of emotional harm, and the trauma can last for a lifetime. Unfortunately, similar to years ago, officials don't do much to help. So years ago, people, even if you did turn to the police, you couldn't really be sure of what the response are. Now that criminal laws are in place, domestic abuse is not perfectly managed, but it's much better managed. But in the case of workplace bullying, there's really no laws or formal organizations that you can turn to help you. I want to talk to a minute about sexual harassment and an odd parallel there. Years ago, when the sexual harassment laws were introduced and incorporated into schools, of course it was presumed that adults too could take part in sexual harassment, and the laws and policies and so forth certainly cover adults doing that. Now, why it is that bullying policies have developed strictly for the student body, I can't imagine why. But it's just not included in school policies, and unless somebody has a school policy that's clearly about adult bullying, please write in and let us know, because I just haven't been seeing that. So we're going to go on. And so today, of course, a lot of schools are organized in teams, and you hope you have the dream team, but sometimes, for some individuals, it's actually a nightmare team, because someone on their team is a bully. So if that happens, what does that look like, and what does that sound like? Well, the thing about bullying is it has to be repeated. Yes, you can have a blow up and there can be a personality conflict or this and that, but this is a repeated systematic kind of event. And so if repeatedly teachers are gossiping about one another, or gossiping about the principal, or gossiping about a parent in a vicious kind of way, spreading rumors about them, or even, oh, hey, let's all go out for drinks at such and so on Friday, and they're consistently not informing somebody, or deliberately they make it clear, you're not invited. We don't want you to come. Or there's outright intimidation going on, and people are making comments. And I'll tell you, one group of people that sometimes use very intimidating tactics are members of the union, and they're intimidating in the sense that people better go along with the union's position. In fact, they better join the union, and if you don't, there's going to be some kind of a consequence for that. At school, people undermining one another, maybe telling parents, oh, that Mrs. Jones, her homework policy, that's ridiculous what she's making those kids do. Or even undermining one another with the kids themselves. Threatening, withholding information, forgetting to tell somebody, oh yeah, the due date on that was changed. Oh yes, there's an assembly that's going on. Oh, didn't we remember to tell you? Oh, I'm so sorry. Making offensive jokes about people, even from emails about dumb blondes, or picking on a something that they're interested in or topics they care about, intruding on the privacy, asking too many personal questions, and then using that to feed the rumor mill, tampering with people's possessions. A lot of bullying goes on kind of openly in faculty meetings, and belittling people, rolling eyes, making comments, and there again is the ostracism. So what happens when bullying behavior is going on? Well, for people in our profession, it's very important to us that we keep our professional status, and rumors and stories about us and people undermining us, that's a threat to your status. It's a threat to your personal standing. Feeling isolated at work is very difficult in educational settings. And when people bullying you, it really puts you into a position where you're overworking, you're trying to compensate and do even better, or working around the situation, and it's very exhausting and can be destabilizing. So who are the typical victims? Well, unlike the classic schoolyard bully who typically picked on the little kid or the weakling, in adult situations it's actually kind of the really great people who are typically the victims. They're the type of people who are very independent, and they refuse to be subservient in this sense. They won't go along with the crowd. Maybe they won't do what the union says, or they refuse to join in on something. They're going to be their own people, but in doing so, they're sacrificing relationships. Oftentimes, they're technically very skilled. They're very well put together. They're often liked by co-workers or popular with students. They might even be a go-to person because they have a lot of professional knowledge. They're ethical and honest, and that actually is one of the things that is a negative in terms of for them trying to cope with a bullying situation, because they're so ethical that they won't lie and they won't do mean things and they won't undermine, and it's their outright honesty that allows them to be such great victims. They're poised, and they're often not politically astute. In other words, they don't know how to go around people's backs and kind of build up their troops, at least not as well as the bully does. So back to the onlookers. I've had the opportunity to present seminars on workplace bullying in school settings, in schools where there's actually bullying going on, and as you're talking about it, you can tell that people are thinking of individuals that they know who have engaged in bullying behavior and probably are right that day. And so when we get into groups to talk about onlookers and strategies that onlookers can use, it's very interesting because the workers are stymied by trying to figure out what strategies they can use. And it's been an epiphany for people because they then realize what it is that they're actually asking of kids. So we expect kids, like, why did you let that happen? You need to report people and so forth and so on. But then as an adult, when you're trying to think of your own strategies on what you're going to do, what steps can you take when you're seeing bullying, it's very, very difficult to construct a plan. So this is not easy for the onlookers, and we need to be thinking about how can we arm the other people at work to help in getting the bullies under control. Well, I have to say the guru of workplace bullying is Gary Nami and his wife Ruth Nami. And it's easy to find this information online, and I encourage you to go online because it's a great resource, and they offer counseling and strategies and resources, and they've collected articles for at least the past 10 years on what's been going on in the workplace. So it's an excellent, excellent resource for you to use.
On that resource you listed for the Workplace Bullying Institute, do you think that it has information for like a principle on how to change a culture that might be toxic in that sort of setting, or is it mostly businesses?
You know, they have worked with schools, and they've done a lot of work with businesses. As far as working on your school culture specifically, I have to say that I think the majority of their work is helping people who are victimized and have been bullied, and what should they do about it. So rebuilding school culture, I wouldn't say that that's the best source for that.
Any advice you
but
would,
there are other sources.
yeah,
Pardon?
give us some advice on that. That would be great as far as...
Yes, and I'd like to get to that a little bit as we go further along, because it's not a simple answer. What I'm going to say is that there are short-term things that you can do and long-term things that you can do. And I guess it has to be so circuitous because this is not an issue that as a nation we have under control. So let me go a little bit further, and I think you'll see what I'm getting at here. But I want to do a little portrait of the bully. What are these adults, what is driving them? And so part of what we have is that these are the kids who were bullies, and I'm so glad that we're working on young people now about their bullying behavior, because the people that are in the workplace now, nobody was stopping them. And they learned how to be very skilled at it, and they learned that nobody's going to do anything about it. Nobody can do anything about it. A lot of times bullies have family of origin issues, and what I mean by that is that they are sometimes victims of abuse or even sexual abuse themselves. But really, that doesn't legitimize going out and being a bully because you came from an abusive background. And also, a lot of times bullies have, I mean, the very most vicious bullies have significant psychological issues. And I'm going to talk briefly about that. And this is 2 to 4% of the population. So, you know, here and there in schools, you're going to find people with antisocial personality disorders. And to officially have this disorder, you need to have 3 or more of these attributes. You're deceitful, you're irritable and aggressive, you have a reckless disregard for the safety of others, and that includes their emotional safety. You don't feel remorse, and repeatedly performing acts that are grounds for arrest. And remember, you only need to have 3 or more of these. And here's the narcissistic personality disorder, again 2 to 4% of the population. These people lack empathy. They have a sense of entitlement. They're exploitatives. They believe they have a special status and that only they can relate to other people of special status or special institutions. They're arrogant. They have a grandiose sense of self. They're envious, or they believe that others are envious of them. They require excessive admiration and need that center of attention all the time. And they have fantasies about their own powers and love and how beautiful they are, successful they are, brilliant they are. So unfortunately, one of the phenomena that happen is sometimes when someone is targeted, other people start to join in. It's a natural human and very inappropriate phenomenon, but it does happen, and it might be happening at your school, that somebody over time is actually being targeted by more and more people on your staff. So the studies that are listed below are talking about how prevalent workplace bullying is in predominantly female organizations, and a lot of schools are predominantly female organizations. And these 2 studies are talking about the huge amount of bullying that goes on in the nursing profession. So I had a little clip here, and we weren't able to fit it in, but you have Glee and the classic bully there, Sue Sylvester. And there's a little situation where Sue is bullying the female coach. And I wish we could have seen the little clip, because what it shows is that Sue sets up a situation where others, the other teachers, won't let the coach sit down and have lunch with them. So the coach leaves the faculty room, and she's very upset, and she goes down, and bing, the bell rings like is so common in schools. You hardly have a chance to catch your breath, and there are all the kids. Well, she hasn't recovered from being ostracized, so can you imagine how she handles the kids in that moment? And if you're guessing that she takes out her anger and upset on them, that's exactly what happens. She turns around and bullies one of the kids. So here's one of the most unfortunate things of all, is that there are no laws against bullying. So if bullying is going on in your school, it's not illegal. There aren't any laws preventing that. And healthy workplace is the terminology that's being used in laws that are being presented across the nation. And David Yamada is the author of the kind of classic healthy workplace law. And it's so strange because in all the other industrialized nations, there are clear laws about bullying and a clear protocol on what you do and how quickly you can lose your job if you continue to do it, and what the punitive measures are, and what kind of counseling is that you have to receive, and so forth and so on. Even nations like Turkey and other nations that surprise me, yes, they have laws and they stick to them. But the United States, no, they don't. And for the past 10 years, various states have tried to institute laws, and for 10 years, none of those laws have gone through. And so across the United States, and you can see this on the Work Bullying Institute website, there are 21 states that have either tried or are in the process of trying to get workplace bullying laws passed, and there are 33 state coordinators. And so if you go online, you can see where exactly is your state in all of this. Now, to my knowledge, the first school district in the Workplace Bullying Institute did work with them. The first school district to institute policies is in Sioux City, Iowa. Again, if you have a policy about workplace bullying for adults, I'd love to know that. So I can see this is becoming a more intriguing topic for people, because in 2010, Parade magazine came out with a little blurb on workplace bullying, and they did a poll, and in their poll, 92% thought that a law was needed to prevent or to deal with workplace bullying. And in the instant poll that was done at Workplace Bullying Institute, 96.8. However, in the Zogby survey that was done, 64% said yes, but 24% were opposed to a workplace bullying law. And I have to think there's even a greater percentage of opposition to workplace bullying laws, because in 10 years, none have passed. Then there were 12% that had no opinion. So in my state, we happen to have the largest legislative body of all 50 states, and I've been able to track what's going on and which state legislators have been trying to propose workplace bullying laws. And so it's my obligation to be in touch with them and let them know that as an educator, I support this effort. So I'm asking you to figure out what's going on in your state and find out, have bills been introduced, and if so, which legislators seem to be aware of this and who are trying to promote these bills. Now this is getting back to what can you do about your school culture. Well, this is the long term. If they don't hear from educators and other business people that this is needed, then these are one of the reasons that bills fall flat in legislative action. So I'm encouraging you to be in touch that way. Now, on the federal level, something happened after the Tyler Clemente situation at Rutgers. And if you'll recall, that was the young man who was a freshman, and he was filmed by his roommate and another person, and he was engaged in a homosexual relationship. and he was a music student and a very talented young man, and he was horrified at the filming and public knowledge, and he committed suicide. So as a result of that, Frank Lautenberg, the Democrat from New Jersey, took a very interesting approach, and I think this one has a lot of promise, because what he's trying to do is put anti-bullying policies into OSHA. And if any of you as principals have had experiences with OSHA, you know that that's a very, very powerful organization, and what they say goes. And so I'm very hopeful that Frank will be able to continue the fight and get anti-bullying policies incorporated into OSHA, and then that would be another route for people to go. So here's another thing that you can do. As you are reviewing your policies and trying to institute your own bullying laws as they apply to students, if you are in a position to ask the superintendent and board to review that and incorporate the staff into those policies, then that is going to give you a very big lever in terms of how to work with the individuals who are engaging in bullying in your workplace. And I'm going to tell you, as you probably have already figured out, without that, you're really going to have a very, very tough time dealing with this, because there's nothing backing you. So just so that you'll know this really is an international concern, I wanted you to be aware that there have been conferences, and they happen every other year. This year, the Workplace Bullying Conference was held in Copenhagen, and the next one is held in Milan, Italy. So maybe we should figure out a representative to go to Milan next summer and represent us as educators. So what are the costs of workplace bullying? Well, actually, they're rather high, because there are certainly health costs, of course, to the individual, but also to the onlookers who suffer, not to the same degree that the individual does, but they certainly can have health, because I think you'll notice if you're having workplace bullying going on how stressful it is. And to work in an unhealthy culture is very disturbing for everybody. So there are health costs, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the health costs. Of course, there are psychological costs, and there are economic costs, because what happens is that there's a range, but no matter who you look at, whether it's Workplace Bullying Institute or the Zogby surveys, what has been found is that when somebody's targeted for bullying, there's Workplace Bullying Workplace Institute says there's a 66% chance that they'll lose or leave their jobs, and the Zogby survey says there's a 77% chance that they will leave or lose their jobs. Now, remembering the profile of what the victim looks like, these are your competent people. They're nice, they're ethical, they're talented. So when you have talented people leave your school because they are unhappy with the climate and they are unhappy with the way they're being treated or the way others are being treated, there's a huge cost to that. There's a cost to kids. All the studies that talk about what happens when the irreplaceable teachers leave and what goes on with kids and their scores and their emotional well-being. So looking at the health impact for people who are targeted by bullies, well, the fact is that the high majority of people who are targeted may visit their doctors, but they do not tell their doctors that they're being bullied at work. And the reason is because they feel ashamed. They're embarrassed to be in the position that they are. They regard themselves as well-educated, highly professional people, and here they are in a situation and they don't know how to handle it. And they feel like they're responsible somehow, that they should be able to get themselves out of this situation, and they can't, and they're humiliated by this. And so the physical ramifications are cardiovascular problems, neurological problems, immunological problems, and they definitely experience stress and anxiety and depression. And as a matter of fact, I know this is known about kids, but The fact is that among bullied adults, the suicide rate is 10 times higher than the suicide rate among normal adults or average adults. So I'm not saying that people who are bullied are necessarily going to commit suicide. It's just that the likelihood is higher for people who have been bullied. Now, this is a poll that we're not going to take, but it's a poll just to give you some ideas, and there were probably about 10 or 12 ideas about how should you deal with bullying at work. So should you A, tell the truth about bullying, about abuse, and be demanding in tone and insist that there be some action? Should there be equal support for both the target and the bullies? Is the quiet, self-effacing, non-confrontive, resistant approach, is that what works best? Or should you be compromising so that the needs of all parties are met? Well, looking at the results of the poll for hundreds of people that have been handling these situations, this A was actually the best way to be dealing with workplace bullying. Equal support was not very effective. Being non-confrontive, even less effective. Compromising is really actually ineffective. So I told you short-term and long-term. Let's talk a little bit about short-term. So one of the things that you can use, and actually with so many people using professional learning community, I think that norms have become more popular and more utilized across the country. And so there are opportunities to integrate into your norms anti-bullying behavior. One of the norms that are part of collaborative norms by Bruce Wellman and Garmston, one of the norms is called paying attention to self and others. And if you institute that your staff reflects on their own adherence to norms, something like paying attention to yourself and others might be useful. For example, I was having problems with one of my staff members who always had something negative and aggressive to say in meetings, always. And I tried so many things over so many years to deal with this behavior, and I could get it calmed down for a little while, and then it would just roar back again. But when I instituted norms across the school, and we used them and reflected on them, one time we were in a meeting, and it was a great meeting. We had a meeting with every grade level. It was a meeting about working effectively as teams with special ed and regular ed, and we were trying to solve some student problems, and it was just fantastic work. So then we get to the grade level where this guy is on it, and I've got about 12 people in the meeting, and we're starting, and he starts in with his normal behavior. And this goes on for a little while, and I stopped and said, well, instead of doing reflection at the end of the meeting, I'd like to stop the meeting right now and do some reflections, and I would like to start by paying attention to myself. And I have to say, in terms of myself, I'm not following this meeting very well because all I'm working on is keeping my temper. And I'd like to pay attention to others, and I know that 2 people, and I think 3 people, have dropped out of this meeting. So let's go around and let's get everybody else's read on attention to self and others. So I turned to the lovely young woman to my left, and she says, well, I think that I must be one of the people who dropped out because I'm just so uncomfortable with the tone of this meeting and the direction this is taken. So we go around, 12 people make similar comments, and he's the last one to comment, and he says, well, yeah, I don't see any problem with this meeting. However, he got the message because after that meeting, he never, ever engaged in that behavior again. And so that's one short-term technique, which you have to build into your culture, working through your norms, is a possibility of how you can eradicate some of this bullying behavior. But for the most part, schools don't really do anything. And so why is that? And the reasons are that bullying is underreported. People are sometimes unaware that it's going on. And this could be true of you. There could be a lot of bullying going on among the staff, and you really don't know about it because nobody's telling you about it. We're sitting there without policies, without regulations, and without laws. A lot of times people will read it as conflict and try to apply conflict resolution strategies, which are very ineffective because, of course, the bully has all the power and isn't about to sincerely resolve anything. Sometimes the employer, the principal, for example, is actually being bullied themselves by their superintendent or by the public or by a school board member. Sometimes the bully appears to be very popular or a high performer or in somewhere really secure, so it's difficult to get at them. Targets lack reporting strategies. And one thing I want to show you is a source. It's called How to Bust the Office Bully, and it's a little handout that you can download. It's 8 tactics for explaining workplace abuse to decision makers, and it's excellent. Dr. Sarah Tracy, I think, was the lead on this, and one of the problems that people have when they're talking about their own bullying experiences, they sound like a crazy person. And so this document helps you to figure out how to document what's going on, how to present the story reasonably, how to stay unemotional, because what typically happens is the last straw happens and somebody's just exploding with emotion about all the abuse that they've taken. And then it's hard to know, are they stable? Is this right? Did this really happen? And so these 8 tactics are such excellent guidelines. So I encourage you to download that. So what doesn't work? It never works to appease the bully. It never works to say, oh, well, both of you are somewhat to blame here. It doesn't work, although we often do target the target as a complainer. It doesn't really work even to pull everybody in, because sometimes the bully is very skilled at getting a whole bunch of people to tell the same story. It's not effective to ignore it, and mediation doesn't work because the bullies don't play fair. So what does work? Well, talking about this with your colleagues so that everybody is working together, maybe in the other schools, they're going to address it too. Addressing incidences as they occur. Taking a survey among your staff to find out to what degree this is going on. Getting some articles out there. Writing an opinion piece. And I already talked about all you can do legally to get things going. Here's a nice resource for you, and it's something you might want to add to your bookshelf. And I already talked about the Workplace Bullying Institute and what you can find online. Other things that work, definitely putting words to it. Exposing the bullies and say, such and so is a bully. That's bullying behavior that you're engaging in once again. But always being careful to check in on the physical and mental health of the person who's being abused and the onlookers. Maybe it's a group of people being abused. Raise awareness. Bring somebody like me in to talk to your entire staff so that it's not a secret anymore that this is going on. And definitely respond to any reports. Anyone who's brave enough to come up and tell you about it, begin your investigation. So on the Workplace Bullying website, they really go into details about the 3-step approach. Name it. Now they encourage people to take time off and describe how to launch a counterattack. You know, that's going to have a mixed review for some of you because I don't know how much you want people to take time off and launch a counterattack. And exposing the bully. And that takes a lot of administrative courage, no doubt about that. So our enduring understandings for today of bullying is common, it's destructive, and it's misunderstood. There's negative consequences for everybody except the bully. U.S. isn't keeping pace legally. We need more policies and legislation. And there are actions that you can take to create a healthy workplace.
This was a great presentation. Thank you very much. I do have a question for you. Since you've been a mentor for many, many years, and you work a lot with principals and teams and that sort of thing, I'm sure this issue has come up, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
All the time, I'm sure. And I understand that the dealing with parents and dealing with community and that sort of thing has gotten a lot more, refractive too. Do you see any movement in districts? I mean, does it help to go to the district at all to try to get policies in your experience?
Well, I think it does, but I think that you have to orchestrate that. I think you've got to run this by some of your colleagues and see if they're concerned about it and want to do something about it, and then maybe go as a group, because this is a huge thing to take on. And like many initiatives, you have to figure it's going to take a very long time to get it under control. So you have to be willing to be in there for the long haul, and you have to have others that are willing to join you. And then the superintendent and school board have to be willing to put this on their plate. And you've got to keep plugging at it. I think it just really takes a lot of time, a lot of stamina, and like I said, a lot of courage.
Yes, exactly. I have another question that has been written in. Please feel free to write in questions as you think of them. But here's another question. The woman writes, at our school we have staff who send anonymous notes complaining about other staff members. How would you advise addressing this?
Well, I always think that it's good to bring up some of these kind of concerns publicly. So just talking about the fact, just the way you just said it. We have staff that write anonymous notes about other staff members, and what are we going to do about it? And, if it's not safe, and it may not be safe to do this kind of thing publicly in a forum at a faculty meeting, well, design a survey. Design a school climate survey. And that can be one of the issues that are wrapped into it. Have you experienced this? Does this concern you? What would you like done about this? That kind of thing. Just polling the staff so that nobody has to be saying this out loud and you don't know what the source of it is, but it's something that you agree to work on as a staff together, because that's probably a symptom of a lot of other things. It's not just the anonymous notes that you want to stop. Why are these people sharpshooting at one another? They're trying to denigrate their colleague in front of their boss. Why are they doing that? It goes deeper than that.
Yeah, so it's a symptom.
That definitely is a form of bullying. Yes, it's a symptom.
What about harassment laws? I mean, you said that there's no law, but is any of this covered under harassment?
Here's I think this is the reason that the U.S. doesn't have laws. What the U.S. laws are very good with are the civil rights. So when the Civil Rights Act in 1964 was legislated, and ever since then, if you could link bullying to gender, sexual orientation, race, color, nationality, handicapping condition, physical appearance, marital status, veteran status, if you could link it, and sometimes you can, but it's very difficult to do that. So if your civil rights are being violated by the bullying, then that's one route that you can go. Sometimes you can prove that a hostile work environment has been created by a bully, and an attorney is going to be able to help you. They might be able to prove, I'm trying to think of the words, there's a particular word you can use, but you're really in a gray area, because none of this, I mean, if you start to talk about civil rights, I mean, most of us can rattle off quite a bit of the civil rights. We know what that covers. But as far as covering bullying, it's so gray what can be covered.
Another question, does a principal, do they have a lot of, if for those of you that are principals, do they have, are there tactics that they can use to institute their own, policies in this area, or should they go through the district on that?
No, I mean, you could try to get something in your handbook, but without a district policy, you're going to really find yourself in trouble. You're going to not be able to follow through on things. The only area that you might be able to do something, and there's kind of a wide open opportunity now, a lot of districts are revamping or more or less upping their teacher evaluation systems. And there might be an opportunity to put something in your teacher evaluation regarding bullying behavior. But I don't, it's that you would have to figure that out on your own. I see openings for that in teacher evaluation systems, but then even if that becomes part of the evaluation, that the teachers and the unions are going to challenge that. And without having school district policy to back you, I don't know whether you'll win or lose.
That's a good point. Another area that's coming up, you mentioned teacher evaluations. Well, principal evaluations are coming up too.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true too. Well, again, another opportunity. Of course, most of us aren't going to try to institute evaluations against our own bullying behavior.
No.
But I'm not sure. What slant are you thinking about?
I was thinking more as we see states moving to systems of principal evaluation where the principal is really the primary stakeholder in increasing or improving school culture.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point.
That could be, a take on this as well. But thank you so much, Kathleen. I think we've run out of our time here. If any of you have other questions, I do recommend that you contact Kathleen. We can, post her information and contact information if you'd like to have a one-on-one conversation. Kathleen, you've done a great job for us as a mentor over the years, and I know many new principals have contacted you for advice. And not all of you are principals, but I know this issue, we see a lot more of this happening, and it's not just with kids. So we thought this would be a nice take for our bullying month, as we call it. Kathleen, any closing thoughts, any thoughts you might reflect on in terms of what people can do, or cyberbullying or anything like that?
Well, I just want to say this is groundbreaking work, and I hope that you'll think seriously about this and trying some short-term tactics. But, I didn't give you much fuel for short-term because there's not much there. But working on the long-term tactics, because when we get laws and policies in place, then you can really have a handle on workplace bullying. And that would be a nice legacy for you to leave in your district and in your school, that you had a hand in naming workplace bullying and eradicating it. So I encourage you to do that. Honor, I'm very agreeable to having my email address out there so people can be in touch with me. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining in tonight. And I hope that I'll be hearing from you.
Yes, thank you again.